everyone, I'm Celeste. Welcome to my BookTube channel. Well, I was so happy to be able to share with you our visit to Lollypop Farm earlier today. Lollypop Farm is part of the Humane Society, and they rescue dogs and cats and try to adopt them out and rehome them to their forever homes. They also take care of smaller mammals, things like rabbits, and they do have a farm program. So if you wander about their beautiful property, you're also likely to see pigs and piglets and sheep and even an emu or two. Stay tuned to the end and I'll share one of those with you. That was fun. So if you go to Lollypop Farm, you can take a walk in their beautiful trail on their property where they keep all of their equine rescues. Now, these are unrideable horses who are either retired from horse racing, so there are some thoroughbreds there, or their owners just simply couldn't afford to take care of them anymore, and so they have been rescued by Lollypop Farm. Now, if you would like to learn more about this equine rescue program and are interested in donating, I will put all of the Lollypop Farm Equine Care Program information down in the description below this video. Well, I love horses, I always have, and I think one of my earliest book memories of horses was through a book called A Pony for the Winter, and this was just a little scholastic paperback book, but it really made a huge impression on me. I think it was the lovely illustration on the cover, and it was basically just a short story about a little girl named Deborah who is able to get a pony, and the pony's name is Molly, and it's a black pony, and it's just so beautiful in the illustration. The black of the horse's coat shows off against the white snow, and she's not sure if she's going to be able to keep Molly. The pony might be taken away. So it's just a really simple tale, but it made such a huge impression on my imagination when I was a little girl, and that was my introduction to the world of horses. I also rode horses, and I actually learned to ride Eastern style. I used to go every week to a riding academy called Roger Young's Stables, and I would go with my friend Kathy, and our parents would take turns driving us there for the lesson. My favorite horse there was a really huge, gentle horse named Herman. And so I just absolutely loved horses from that point on. I did do some jumping competitions, not too many of those, just a few, but it just only served to anchor my love of horses even more. During that time of my childhood, my parents took us all on vacation, my brothers and sister and I, in a camper down the East Coast. And one of the places we visited was Chincoteague, Virginia. And you may know that name from the famous horse book, Misty of Chincoteague, one of my favorite and most heartwarming horse stories of all time. This is written by Marguerite Henry, and it's just so memorable. It's just so impressed in my imagination, and to actually go to that area where the Beebe family lived, and they're the protagonists of the story, and to know that Misty used to be there and lived there was just so magical for me. And I remember bringing my copy of Misty into my bunk in the camper at night and reading it by flashlight, and it's just such a strong memory that's impressed on my imagination. And in the story, as you probably know, there's a famous yearly swimming of the horses. between Chincoteague Island and Chincoteague Island, and lots of spectators go to see that. Now, these horses are all descended from horses which were shipwrecked on a galleon years and years and years prior, and that's how Marguerite Henry actually opens her story. And I'm just going to read a little bit of it for you here, because it'll just give you a sense of why a little girl or boy who started reading this book would just immediately become immersed in this world. The first chapter is called Live Cargo. And of course, the illustrations by Wesley Dennis are just marvelous. So there's the ship. So let me just read you a little passage from this. A wild ringing neigh shrilled up from the hold of the Spanish galleon. It was not the cry of an animal in hunger. It was a terrifying bugle, an alarm call. The captain of the Santo Cristo strode the poop deck. Cursed be that stallion, he muttered under his breath as he stamped forward and back, forward and back. Suddenly he stopped short. The wind! It was dying with the sun. It was spilling out of the sails, causing them to quiver and shake. He could feel his flesh creep with the sails. Without wind, he could not get to Panama, and if he did not get there, and get there soon, he was headed for trouble. The more ponies to be delivered to the Viceroy of Peru could not be kept alive much longer. Their hay had grown musty, the water casks were almost empty, and now this sudden calm, this heavy warning of a storm. He plucked nervously at his rusty black beard as if that would help him think. We lie in the latitude of white squalls, he said, a look of vexation on his face. When the wind does strike, it will strike with fury. His steps quickened. We must shorten sail. He made up his mind. Well, of course, they end up getting shipwrecked off the coast of Virginia and off of the coast of the islands. And the horses make their way ashore there, and after that you have the wild ponies. They had successive generations, and one of the descendants was Misty of Chincoteague. So Marguerite Henry is such a treasured, just a beloved author for me, and Misty is one of my favorite horse tales of all time. And of course, she would follow it up with so many other books. One, for example, King of the Wind, I believe won the Newbery Award. She had so many great ones. And she also had an influence on me as a young would-be writer, because she also published a book called Dear Readers and Writers. And she talked about how when she was a little girl, she had a little wooden red desk in the kitchen. And she used to sit down there and write stories about animals. And those were the early beginnings of her as a writer and a teller of animal tales. And so I wanted to be just like Marguerite Henry and sit in my little kitchen at a little scratched red table and take out my pencils and writing paper and write. Next, I'd like to share a horse book or horse tale which is so near and dear to my heart, and surprisingly it is a book without words. It is The Silver Pony by Lynd Ward. You may know Lynd Ward's illustrations from books like The Biggest Bear. He wrote several books that were wordless. They were wordless novels, and I think you could safely call him an early forerunner of the graphic novel. He was doing this decades and decades and decades before others were. He worked mainly in engravings, wood blocks, and in the case of The Silver Pony, through casing paint. And what this does is it tells a story in black, white, and gray, but is the story anything but in terms of how colorful it is? And I'll just show you the first page here. The thing that is so magical about this book is that every child or adult who reads it comes up with a slightly different tale to tell. And even just look at the end pages. I mean, look at the sunflowers. It is gorgeous. But I'll just show you the first few pages so you can get a sense of what it's like. Let's see. Oh, and even the chapters are done wordlessly. So there's chapter 1, so 1 star. And you see a boy. He looks to be working on his family's Midwest farm. This is, of course, my interpretation of the story. And above him in the sky, he sees something. What could it be? It looks like a horse, or maybe it's just a bird. He goes on with his work. He's feeding the pigs. He goes and sees that the cows are tended to. When his work is done, he lays down to have a rest. And he sees the horse. And it looks to be a winged horse. The boy goes out to gather apples and he sees the horse again. Well, he gets the horse to come near to him, this winged pony, by holding out an apple from the apple tree, and ends up riding on the horse's back. And the horse takes off, they take wing, and they set off into the sky and have adventures in many lands. And there are a total of 80 wordless drawings in this book. As I said, I've used this book not only with my own son, but with nieces, nephews, and also when I was a teacher's aide working in several schools. And the children would actually tell me the story. And it was interesting to see how they would tell it slightly differently each time, depending on their own imagination. Yeah, I definitely recommend learning about Lynd Ward as an illustrator, and also to find yourself a copy of this book. Now, it does also come available as a silver paperback, and those editions are usually a bit cheaper. The hardcovers are a bit more difficult to come by, but if you can find it as a hardcover, I highly recommend that. In a way, it's sort of similar to the story of Icarus, but it does have a different ending. So the Silver Pony, don't miss out on this one. And of course, there are so many other wonderful books about horses. One of them I remember reading as a young teenager was My Friend Flicka by Mary O'Hara. And this is a story about a boy named Ken McLaughlin, and he sees a horse galloping past him on his family's Wyoming farm and decides that she is the yearling he's been longing for. But Flicka comes from a line of wild horses and is going to prove more difficult to train than Ken first realizes. So this is a story of his love and determination, and his willingness to fight for her no matter what. So that is My Friend Flicka. Yeah, so that's that. And then I don't know if you're aware of it, but well, you know I'm a Nancy Drew fan, and you know I love books by Grosset and Dunlap. Well, what you may not know is that Grosset and Dunlap also has a huge variety, a library of hardcover books on horses. And so they're called Famous Horse Stories. And so this is the one that I have owned, and that is called Bluegrass Champion, also known as Harlequin Hullabaloo. And this is by Dorothy Lyons. Dorothy Lyons wrote many different stories about horses for children, and they all have a color of some sort in the title. And in terms of Grosset and Dunlap's horse story offerings, if you just take a quick look at the back cover, you'll see all the other titles that they have in this series. So this is the story of Harlequin Hullabaloo, who is a famous racehorse, and the girl who ended up training him. And of course, there are other famous books about horses, such as National Velvet. And in that story, it's the girl whose name is Velvet. It was obviously made into the famous movie with Elizabeth Taylor. But that is the story of a young girl and her dream and taking her horse to victory. And then, of course, we couldn't have a discussion about children's books about horses without mentioning Black Beauty. Black Beauty by Anna Sewell is, of course, a children's classic. It was first published in 1877, and it's a great example of an anthropomorphic tale in which the horse speaks. The horse has its own voice, and it was a brilliant idea for Anna Sewell to have the horse tell its story because, sadly, it's often a story of abuse at the hands of its humans. At one point, Black Beauty is a cab horse being mistreated by a vicious groom and is whipped. And, you know, it's just horrible to see how the animal is treated. But this book was so instrumental in making people aware of how animals were being mistreated, and in fact it helped to change laws around how horses could be treated. And the message, I think, is really just truly universal and timeless. It's such a marvelous book. One book that I wanted to share with you that I just finished reading, actually, is a non-fiction book, and that is called Writing Black Beauty, Anna Sewell, The Creation of a Novel and the Story of Animal Rights. And this was a very interesting book. I will say, just as way of warning, it's written in kind of a slow, perhaps a little bit dry style, but the story it is telling is so important, and I think it would be a good addition to any person's library who is interested in learning about life in the Regency period and life in the Victorian era. The reason I say that is because this book is just as much about Anna Sewell's mother, Mary, as it is about Anna herself. The book starts with Mary Sewell growing up in a conservative Quaker household in rural England during the Regency period, and it talks about abuse to animals at that time. We do tend to focus, I think, on the more romantic aspects of the Regency and the Victorian era. However, this book tells you about life on the other side. So this talks about how in Regency England there was a great deal of cruelty to animals. There was gaming and betting, gambling. There, you know, in the Renaissance we had heard about bear baiting. Well, in the Regency period they had bull baiting, and they would train dogs to be vicious and to rip into the animals and to ultimately be killed themselves. So there's a lot of cruelty going on, not to mention the use of certain kinds of whips and crops and weighted crops at that, and just beating animals senseless in order to try to get them to do what you wanted instead of treating them with love. So the book is about that, and then it's also about the birth of Anna Sewell. And at age, I want to say 14, she was an adolescent. She unfortunately fell and became disabled, which I had not realized. She broke her ankle, and it was not set properly, or it didn't heal properly, and so she would then walk with a limp, or not walk at all for the rest of her life. And it was very sad to read that. And it was because medicine at the time just didn't know any better. But she went from being a bright, vivacious, athletic young girl to being a bit of an invalid. Now, one of the things that she did love to do, where she did feel at her most natural, was when she was riding horses. They became her legs. And this is the story of her growing up into the Victorian era. And she became very aware of the way animals were treated around her. And as she got older, she was rather ill. She had illnesses throughout her life. And when she was in her 30s and into her 40s, she realized that she really wanted to write this story, and in it convey that it's not cool, it's not okay to abuse horses. And she decided to let the horse have a voice. So this is that story. And oh my goodness, so much came and generated from her writing this book. And with it, we saw the birth of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty towards animals, and we saw laws change. So this is an important story. It needed to be told. If you are someone who participates in Jane Austen July, if you're someone who's interested in history and social history, if you love animals, or if you're interested in the Victorian era, I would recommend getting this. As I said, the one reason I would not give it 4 or 5 stars is because it's written in kind of a dry way, and so that did detract from it. This could have been an absolute page turner. As it is, it was written in kind of a scholarly way, and so I do need to detract a few stars for that, but I would give it a solid 3 stars, maybe even 3.5, because it's an important story. And it will bring Anna Sewell and her world and her mother Mary's world to life for you. So yeah, writing Black Beauty. Well, that's everything I have for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. There are so many wonderful horse tales, aren't there? And I would love it if in the comments below you might mention some of yours. Are there horse stories from other countries that I should read? Are there other vintage children's books on horses that I've missed here? Let me know. And oh, as I promised you, I am changing my video publishing day to Fridays rather than Tuesdays. Now, I may still publish some content on Tuesdays. That will more likely be tags, shorts, community posts, things like that, or additional like extra content. On Fridays, I'll reserve that for sort of my regular longer form vlogs and videos. And yeah, that's about it. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Get out there, go visit your local animal shelter, take a walk around, see some animals in nature. And yeah, and oh, as also promised, I have a little bit of footage of 2 emus that also live at Lollypop Farm. So as I end here, let's go out with the emu luxuriating in the afternoon grass. See you again real soon. Bye-bye.